For many Big Ten football teams, the college football season has already concluded. Yes, many will play in bowl games, although many will also not. But those that are playing in bowl games will probably suffer a lot of opt-outs. The transfer portal is already opened. And with the college football playoff expanding to 12 teams, it's a lot more feasible for many other programs to set the expectation of playoff success, where now if you're Michigan State or if you're Nebraska or if you're Iowa or Wisconsin, your expectations now include reaching the college football playoff when it didn't before, because the field has expanded, because there are more opportunities, because there are more seeds. I mean, the amount of teams that are reaching the playoff this year compared to last year have tripled. So what I want to talk about are 5 Big Ten teams who can contend for a college football playoff berth, some of them potentially a national championship in 2025, but I more so want to focus on just contention for a college football playoff spot in general, who didn't make it this season. So Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, and Indiana are excluded. They cannot be on this list because they've made it this season. These are teams who I think, whether it's because their staff is elite or they're making staff upgrades or they have a good roster, they're recruiting well, because of many different factors, maybe their schedule's very easy and workable, at least from a very early 2025 preseason standpoint, or they're returning a lot of players. For a variety of reasons, I think that these teams can contend for a college football playoff berth, some for a national championship in 2025. And of course, all of them are from the Big Ten that's in the title of the video. Big Ten college football playoff contenders for 2025. Some new college football playoff blood from the Big Ten as it relates to the 12-team college football playoff era, which sadly may be short-lived, or maybe not. Yeah, sadly is the wrong term, because I think that change for the playoff is necessary. But a team that was a contender in the playoffs and for the national championship for 3 years in a row, the Michigan Wolverines had a down year this season. They finished 7-5, 5-4 in the regular season. They beat Ohio State, their only road win and only good win of the season. I was going to say ranked. USC was technically ranked when they beat them, but USC didn't finish the season ranked. So it was really the only successful big win of the season. It was the only win against a top 10, top 5 team in football power, which is what I classify as a big time win. Why can Michigan be a contender in 2025 for the college football playoff? And I'm even going to go a step further and say the national championship. It's because their roster and coaching are improving. They're making better hires in the coaching staff. That's why they fired Kirk Campbell, and they're going to make an upgrade there. Their roster, because of a top 10 recruiting class and because they're committing millions of dollars to the portal, is going to be better. Bryce Underwood can be a key contributor. They're returning some players along the defensive line, like Rayshawn Benny, for example. They have some nice players in the secondary. On the offensive line, some good tight ends like Marlon Klein, for example, and some young running backs who I enjoy. And their investment, which feeds all of this, is up. And their schedule for the Michigan Wolverines is also a very workable one. I mean, you look at their non-conference. There is no team like Texas who is a presumed national title contender. Their non-conference schedule is hosting New Mexico, then playing at Oklahoma, which will be tough, but Oklahoma is not expected to be as good as Texas is this season. Oklahoma right now, I'd say, is in a pretty messy spot as a program. You look at Central Michigan, that's Michigan's third non-conference game. It's at home. Their conference schedule is at Maryland, hosting Purdue, hosting Washington, hosting Wisconsin, playing at Michigan State, at Nebraska, at Northwestern, at USC, and of course at the end of the year they host Ohio State. And all the dates of the games except the Ohio State game are not known. Those will actually be dropping tomorrow, but those are their conference games. A much more workable schedule than last year. They don't play Oregon, they don't play Penn State. Games like at Nebraska, at USC, and at Michigan State can be tough. Ohio State is going to be a good team. Of course, on the road at Oklahoma in the non-conference early in the year when it's hot down there could be a mess, especially since Oklahoma's making their own staff and roster upgrades potentially. But this schedule has a lot of opportunity attached to it. So I think that Michigan can be a college football playoff contender, and with the amount of talent and the upside of said talent and coaching upgrades they're bringing in, they could even be a national championship contender next year. But a lot of that's to be determined. I still wouldn't view Michigan as a better team entering next year than like Penn State, where I almost said them earlier because I was thinking ahead, or Ohio State or Oregon, for example. Need to prove some things. It's similar with USC in the sense that they do need to prove some things, and when I say that they're a college football playoff contender next year, and I think even a national championship contender next year, that's not me saying they're better than the teams who have made it this season. Like, I wouldn't tag them entering next season as a better team probably than Oregon or Penn State or Ohio State. Indiana's a little bit of a different story, but I still think that Indiana could very well be good because they want to invest in football, and it's clear by their NIL spending and coaching hires. They retained all their coaches except for OC Tino Sansuri, who is staying for Indiana's playoff run. So he's at least showing a lot of ethics there by not leaving the Hoosiers until the playoff run's finished. That's awesome. You look at USC, though. They have an elite staff on defense. They lost Matt Entz to be the head coach at Fresno State, but Eric Henderson's a great D-line coach. I think that D'Anton Lynn's one of the nation's best DCs. Doug Belk, good secondaries coach. And Lincoln Riley is still a great offensive mind. I think he has to do a better job at running the football and be less pass happy. I think they didn't use their rushing offense properly this year, and the Trojan Blade, great YouTube channel, can attest for that. Many USC fans can. I've seen it with my own eyes. But I think their staff overall is elite, and they'll be in year two, which helps a lot because that defense is going to be even better next year than it was this season. And I'm confident they will make upgrades on the lines of scrimmage. They finished off strong with their 2025 recruiting class. I think that USC next season can get it done. That they can do a good job and rebound and have a year that's more like the 2022 year than the 2023 or 2024 season. Their schedule is hosting Missouri State, hosting Georgia Southern, playing at Notre Dame October 18th, and then in conference, the dates to be determined, same with the times, at Illinois, at Nebraska, at Oregon, at Purdue, Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State, Northwestern, UCLA at home. So a lot of tough road games, and also you got that home trip against Michigan, and some of those other teams could be problematic, but it's still a workable schedule where there isn't an Ohio State, there isn't a Penn State, you have Michigan, but you get them at home, you have Oregon on the road and Notre Dame on the road, but if you make certain moves, you maybe could beat those teams, though for Oregon especially, I'd say that's doubtful. However, a 10-2 USC, would they be denied from the playoffs? I don't know, but I'd probably lean toward no, they wouldn't. So I think they're a college football playoff contender. I think if they make certain moves, like Michigan, they can be a national championship contender in 2025. Illinois, I do not think is a national championship caliber team next season. They certainly aren't this year. But they're a college football playoff contender because their schedule's manageable. They're going to return a lot of their roster. I do believe that you never know in the portal era. And I think that Brett Bielema has shown this year that he's a pretty good head football coach. I mean, look at Illinois' schedule. I'm going to read it off to you. Western Illinois, at Duke, hosting Western Michigan. That road game at Duke can tell a lot about this team, like the game against Kansas and also the game against Nebraska did. And then their conference schedule is Maryland, Northwestern, Ohio State, Rutgers, and USC at home, Indiana, Purdue, Washington, and Wisconsin on the road. There is a chance in all of these games that Illinois is favored in 11 or 10 of them. There's a world where that will happen. Because you look at what they return, and Luke Altmaier has eligibility. You see that, Colin Dixon eligibility, Hank Beatty eligibility, parts of their offensive line and running back room have eligibility. Their defense does, like Aiden Lowry, young player. Obviously, Caden Fagan's going to be back. I like elements of this team. You have a lot of juniors who, could try their hand in the NFL, but also could return for a better season. I mean, think about it. Penn State and Oregon are analytically top 10. In my opinion, they should be higher than that, top 5. I think the analytics are holding some games against them that they shouldn't. And Illinois played both of them. And they played Minnesota, and that was their worst loss of the year. Entering 2025, there may not be a duo of games that are as hard as at Penn State and at Oregon. I don't think there are here. I think the hardest duo will be either Ohio State paired with USC, both at home, or Ohio State paired at Indiana. And that probably won't be as hard as the, two road games against Penn State and Oregon, who might rematch in the national championship duo. So, workable schedule, good staff, good roster that has a lot of eligibility returning, and then you have, I think, again, workable schedule, good roster, good coaching staff, experience. There's a lot to like about Illinois entering 2025, I do believe. And I identified that in the preseason, that this is a young team, which is why I didn't expect them to have a lot of success in 2024, which was a foolish mistake. I picked them to go 5-7. They went 9-3. And now we're entering 2025 here for Illinois, because they're going to play in their bowl game and they'll take their bowl game seriously. I doubt Illinois will have a lot of opt-outs. That South Carolina-Illinois game is a game I'm going to be previewing and I'm excited for. But looking ahead a bit, I think that they have potential to them. Now, I want to talk about Nebraska. Why can the Nebraska Cornhuskers contend for a college football playoff spot next year? I don't think that they're national championship contenders. I think Nebraska's a long, long way to go before they're national title contenders. I put emphasis on that because I think we all know that Illinois will perhaps never be a national championship contender. Nebraska has been in the past, and they have a more talented roster by recruiting rankings than Illinois does. And I think you saw that when they played Illinois, where Nebraska had the more talented roster and for a lot of the game looked like the better team, but Illinois was just mentally and physically tougher and had a better game plan. Hence why they won. Nebraska loses a lot. They lose some players to the portal, some key players, but they also lose a lot of starters to the NFL. However, Rule is in year 3, and historically, year 3 under Matt Rule has been huge. They upgraded their offensive coordinator big time, from Marcus Satterfield, who's one of the worst offensive coordinators in the country, to Dana Holgorsen, who has historically been one of college football's best offensive minds, and he has head coaching experience. So you basically get like a CEO within a CEO situation, which is very helpful for the offensive side of the ball. Dylan Raiola comes back. Nebraska is going to make moves in the portal. They're recruiting in the top third of the Big Ten. And a common theme in this video has been manageable schedule. It's a very common theme, in fact. You look at Nebraska and the Cornhuskers in the non-conference, they play Cincinnati in a neutral site game, which, I mean, maybe that'll be canceled. I don't know, but I don't think it will be, on Lucas Oil Stadium. Then they host Akron. They host Houston Christian, an FCS team. And then in conference, they play at Maryland, at Minnesota, host Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State, Northwestern, USC, and they play at Penn State and at UCLA. That is a schedule that I think is very similar to this season's, which was it wasn't as easy as expected because Indiana and Ohio State are both top 10 teams. But, I mean, let's say that Penn State is probably a top 10 team next year with what they're expected to return and how they recruit, and one of USC or Michigan's a top 10 team. Well, that's, 2 top 10 teams, and the rest are teams that should be beatable. Like, think about it. In 2024, Illinois was beatable, but Nebraska lost. Ohio State, even on the road, 1-score game. Nebraska could have won. It was a winnable game. USC was beatable. Iowa, very beatable. The only games that really weren't winnable were Indiana and UCLA. UCLA should go in the other category. I just forgot to mention them. UCLA was a winnable game. Nebraska just started off very slow in almost a flukish way and nearly came back in the end. So there was an outcome this year, though very, very unlikely. There was an outcome where Nebraska, goes 9-3, 10-2. Statistically, it's probably possible they could have went 11-1, but I'm not going to go there because that's statistics and hypotheticals. But they have a manageable schedule. They've upgraded their offensive staff. I want to see what moves they make in the portal, and also staff-wise, they made some staff moves today that I want to process and look over before I make a prediction on them or before I say they're going to contend for the playoffs for sure. But I think right now they should be in that conversation. And finally, this is more of a dark horse than anything else. We have Michigan State. Why can Michigan State be a college football playoff contender next year? Well, I think it's because their staff is one of the best in the country. I truly believe that Michigan State has an elite staff. And I expect the Spartans to make roster upgrades big time. I already hear that they're in contention for an offensive lineman out of Northwestern who's good. I think Josh Thompson is his name. A cornerback from Alabama. I think another player from Alabama. And the Spartans' schedule, they open up against Western Michigan, host Youngstown State, and then host Boston College. And then conference-wise, they play at Indiana, at Iowa, at USC, at Nebraska, at Minnesota. And they host Maryland, Michigan State, Penn State, and UCLA. It looks to be, well, not an easy schedule, an easier schedule than this year's schedule in 2024, where they played Indiana, top 10, Oregon, top 10, Ohio State, top 10, Boston College on the road in kind of a weird spot, and BC had a lot of, good players, especially earlier in the year, and sort of a weird scheme, like they were able to catch some teams by surprise. And then Michigan State also played Iowa. They beat them, but Iowa power ratings wise is a pretty good team, top 25 team even. So I know that this year was a little bit underwhelming compared to my preseason expectations, and a lot of the blowouts toward the end against Rutgers especially, and also even Indiana especially, rubbed people the wrong way, and understandably so, and the loss to Michigan was bad. But this staff is elite, and I think they're figuring out some things and adapting to what they faced in year one. They're going to have to use the portal heavily again. It's good that they're bringing in their first ever recruiting class of players that they've recruited and scouted. Their strength and conditioning I still think is good. They're going to need to bulk up, and by that I mean in terms of depth on the offensive line. And yeah, they're going to need to make some changes, but I think they're going to make those changes roster-wise. I believe in the staff, and they return Aiden Giles, Nick Marsh, it sounds like he's back. They got a lot of key players back. So there's optimism, I think, from my perspective, when I look at the Michigan State Spartans and when I look at Jonathan Smith and his staff. This is the fringiest pick in this video. I think that all the other teams probably have a higher probability of reaching the playoff than the Spartans do next year. But I'm not counting out an elite staff in year two with a more manageable schedule and potential roster upgrades from reaching the playoffs. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also hit that notification bell so that way you can get notified when new content from College Football with Sam drops. I appreciate you very much, and also share the video around to others who enjoy the sport of college football and love it, as I do and as you do, and comment your thoughts down below so that we can have a conversation, because I want to know what you are thinking. And join our Discord server where we talk college football 24/7 via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Thank you to my Heisman Patreon members, Crash2488, Brasco Rascal, and Conlo OH. Thank you to my All-American Patreon members, Chris Lane, Ismar, and Tyler Nye. And thank you to my All-Conference members, John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, Joshua Jorgensen, and Will Loftus. Make sure to check out my merchandise store and or Patreon page, or super chat down in the comment section below to support the channel. The Patreon page and merchandise store links are in the description or down below in the pinned comment. I hope you have a wonderful day. It is December, so Merry Christmas and also Happy New Year. I will see you guys soon.